all the rhetoric that's coming out of the BJP, out of the Prime Minister about reforms and about taking growth to a new trajectory, creating crores of jobs, manufacturing will change and investment will grow. That was the context. And I think after 5 years, we, because of errors of what I call errors of omission and commission, I think Mr. Modi and Mr. Jaitley have presided over a very disappointing economic scenario, and now the government's own latest Ministry of Finance monthly economic report now says that the growth is slowing down, and it is because the proximate causes are a slowdown in consumption, investment, and exports. What else is left?
Welcome to the Outlook Bibliofile. We have with us today Mr. Salman Anees Soz. Mr. Soz is an economic expert, a commentator. He's worked as an advisor with the World Bank, with the Asian Development Bank, and his domain expertise is on development economics, economic planning, strategy, and he's also a spokesperson of the Congress Party. But why we have him today with us is his book, The Great Disappointment, and this looks at the last 5 years of the Modi years of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government and the failures on the economic policy front. So it's a rather fleeting kind of a comment, great disappointment. It doesn't leave any gray areas. It's a very simple assessment. How do you see the last 5 years in terms of the economic policy?
I think this title actually has quite a few people have told me that, is it really just the great disappointment, or was it the great betrayal? You should have worded it tough. It should be much tougher. But I view it from the perspective of the citizen. What would a citizen kind of think about what has happened in the past 5 years? If you remember when Mr. Modi took over in 2014, there were great expectations. And those expectations were, and the rhetoric was such about, how the Modi government would do in 60 months what others did not do in 60 years. Right. Others including Atal Bihari Vajpayee for that matter. And that struck with me, and that stuck with me. And I kind of said, I was thinking about it then in 2014, and you're right. I was a Congress spokesperson then. I'm a spokesperson now, and I said all the rhetoric that's coming out of the BJP, out of the Prime Minister about reforms and about taking growth to a new trajectory, creating crores of jobs, manufacturing will change and investment will grow. That was the context. And I think after 5 years, we, because of errors of what I call errors of omission and commission, I think Mr. Modi and Mr. Jaitley have presided over a very disappointing economic scenario, and now the government's own latest Ministry of Finance monthly economic report now says that the growth is slowing down, and it is because the proximate causes are a slowdown in consumption, investment, and exports. What else is left? So I think overall, on jobs front, on farmers' distress, on small businesses that were devastated during demonetization and the implementation of GST, I think when you look at all this and then you look at the opportunity that the Prime Minister had, single party government after 30 years, in 30 years, and I think that is why I call it the great disappointment.
Your chapter also starts with, your book also starts with a full chapter on inheritance.
Yes.
Now that's, I think, a very fair way of looking at, because economic policy is always looked as a continuum.
That's right.
Now, when you look at it in terms of the inheritance part of Mr. Modi, as I was going through your chapters, you also make a rather fair judgment or comment saying that even with the UPA, there were a lot of failures,
Sure.
and that in terms of furthering economic reform, things could have been done better. What were the liabilities in that sense that Modi inherited, and how difficult would it have been for him in the initial years at least to proceed?
Well, this is a very important question because it goes to the heart of why I wrote the book. You see, I told you about this 60 years, I will do in 60 months what others did not do in 60 years. As a development practitioner, I know that's not possible. So, that's a disingenuous way to say it. But, it actually compelled me to think about what legacies others inherited. So I talk about Prime Minister Nehru, and the legacy that he had from the British was that he had the biggest refugee crisis outside of World War II to deal with, and there was lack of food. There was no food in the country. In fact, the first finance minister's budget speech is all about food and the paucity of food. And in a similar way, every prime minister received something. I think actually Prime Minister Nehru received a very poor inheritance, but others got a mix. And as did Mr. Vajpayee, as did Dr. Manmohan Singh, as did Prime Minister Modi. Now, I think there were some challenges that Mr. Modi kind of inherited. And the one big challenge in my view is the banking sector problems that we've had. Now, you see, you have to understand that the banking sector is like the lifeblood of the economy. If the banking sector is not working well, it has a direct impact across. Now, in 2012 or so, reports had started emerging about the non-performing assets problem in India's banking sector, especially in public sector banks. And many institutions had flagged this. The World Bank had flagged this, IMF, the Reserve Bank of India, and the Ministry of Finance's Department of Economic Affairs. Everybody had been talking about this incipient problem. And this problem, contrary to this idea that, people just picked up the phone and gave loans to their cronies and all that, that's not, I think that's unfair to so many people who do business legitimately in this country. If you remember, the economy was growing really well, and the global economy was doing well in the 2005 to 2008 area. Now, at that time, people became optimistic. Perhaps there was too much exuberance. They borrowed, invested, and then the global financial crisis hit in 2008, and things started going downhill, and many people could not repay their loans. So this was a problem that, to my mind, was the single biggest challenge that the new government faced. And unfortunately, this is in my mind, this is the biggest problem that they left unresolved. And I think this is the biggest contributor to what I would say is the kind of a failure in economic policy management for this government.
Is it? You mentioned Amartya Sen that several economists who've talked about mishandling of the economy, who've talked about policy. I mean, when demonetization happened, pretty much every noted economist, not just in India but even abroad, said that this is a disaster. Dr. Manmohan Singh, who himself is an economist, predicted a 2% fall in the GDP. Now, not as a Congress spokesperson, but as an economist, what is the impact of demonetization that you look at?
Okay, so first of all, I wrote this book. Obviously, I'm a congressman, so I can't divorce that reality in any way. But the fact is that this book is to my mind, is very well researched. Does not kind of get into rhetoric. It just talks about. So I've tried to put my World Bank hat on and try to write this book, and I've tried to be fair, to Mr. Modi as well. And I have praised him in certain areas, and I've praised Mr. Vajpayee's government, and but I've tried to be even-handed. But demonetization, in fact, I'd written about demonetization regularly. Was a mindless kind of experiment. You don't do something like that for a country that is mature.
Self-goal.
It's a total. It's not just a self goal. It actually disproportionately impacted those who had no voice in this thing, the marginalized, the poor. So, but to be honest with you, even I kind of did not think the impact would be so long lasting. In fact, I remember an exchange on Twitter with Vivek Deheja, who is an economist at a Canadian university, and he's a follower of Jagdish Bhagwati. And I write about Jagdish Bhagwati and Amartya Sen in this book. And Vivek, who's a friend, but we had this disagreement, and I said, we're going to see some adverse impacts over the next few quarters. And he felt that was not going to be the case. Turns out we were both wrong. He was wrong because he felt he had a much more optimistic view of it, and now, of course, he's changed his view on this. I was wrong because I felt it was going to be a shorter term impact, but it's turned out to be longer term. Now, there's IMF research which indicates that when you have shocks to the economy that are like of this kind of a nature, not demonetization per se, they've done a cross-country study, they say that you have permanent loss of output. And the reason for that is if you lose a business and you have to shut down, it's not that you can just after a few months say, okay, I'm going to restart the business and it's going to be just like it was, because things have moved on. So I think we've suffered permanent losses of output, and why he did it, Mr. Modi must know better, but clearly he did not seek advice from, and he had experts with him. He had Arvind Panagaria with him, he had Raghuram Rajan with him, he had Arvind Subramanian with him. These are they're terrific senior economists, although I have some disagreements with some of them, but they would never recommend something like this.
This thing of an informal economy. Now, you also talked about the double impact, kind of. Immediately, of months after demonetization, you had GST. From a layman's perspective, who's not, a student of economy and of economics, even to me, it's clear that there also seems to be a sort of a misguided assault on the informal sector.
Yes.
And something like, let's have only the organized sector and not the unorganized sector,
Yes.
because the impression seems to be that it's the unorganized sector where you have corruption and you have, cash dealings and all that.
Yes.
Is that where Mr. Modi largely went wrong? A very wrong view of where, the economy operates and what you should be doing.
And it's not just Mr. Modi. I think many people in this country have basically taken it upon themselves to somehow, by hook or by crook, we've got to formalize the economy. Now, formalization is not is a good goal to have, but what most countries do is that they go through the process of economic development over time. As you progress, parts of the economy formalize.
Transitions.
You have to go through the process. There are no shortcuts to development, and I think that's what Mr. Modi and his supporters and all those who support formalization, they don't get. This obsession with formalization has hurt India, I think. Instead of letting people make money, informal, formal, these are just constructs in some ways, right? This whole idea that we must collect lots of revenues for the government, I'm not in favor of that. The reason is simple. Like I said, India remains a country with limited capacity to implement programs, especially in the government sector. So nobody can tell me, look what the government did with when the crude prices fell. So instead of giving some relief to the general population, what did the government do? They actually increased the taxes so that there's no transfer of benefit to the people. That means if you can tell me, if anybody can convince me and say that government knows how to spend money better than the Aam Aadmi, the common person, then I'll say, okay, then you're right. But the government does not know how to spend money better. That's a truism around the world, right? If the government knew how to spend more money better, then all power to you. But that's not how the Indian government works. So I would have suggested keep some money with the consumer. Let them, they know how to spend their money. You take some of this benefit, give some of the benefit to the consumers. This obsession with black money, ready wala. I mean, what black money is he? He just goes and sells something and gets some money. He's trying to make it
pretty much uses it the
same day. Let people. This is what I tell my own colleagues as well in the party, and this is what we've been trying to kind of work towards. If you want to create jobs in this country, you've got to unleash private enterprise, whether it is a one-man or one-woman company, or if it's a conglomerate. Unleash them, especially at the MSME level, micro, small, and medium enterprise. Give them an opportunity to do their business. When they grow, they'll hire people. But if you're always going to put somebody on their head, ye inspector hai, wo inspector hai, ye permission hai, wo permission hai, they will not flourish and you cannot create jobs.
We come back to the issue of inheritance.
Yes.
What is it that the new government is going to inherit? You said it's not going to be good. But more importantly, what are the 3 immediate steps that a new government, irrespective of the party, needs to take to put things back in track? And how easy or difficult is it going to be?
Okay. Well, first of all, the inheritance is not going to be very good, unfortunately. On balance, I think the inheritance is going to be very poor, and it's going to be somewhat very challenging, I think, for the next government, because all the basic indicators are trending in the wrong direction. And this has been going on for a while, and we don't even know what how big the economy really is. I don't really think anybody has any idea. This notion that India is the 6th largest economy and all, which is fine, but that may soothe some people, but on a per capita basis we are way below most countries, and that is our reality. We're still a poor country. In World Bank parlance, we are a low middle income country, and with a per capita income of about $2,000. So what do we do? I think that's the thing. It's going to be a tough time, especially with these demographic challenges, job situation, farmers' distress. I would say that the next government should immediately focus on restoring autonomy to our institutions, especially economic institutions like the RBI and our institutions that look after data, our economic data. We need to, bolster their capacity, and we need to affirm openly to the country that we will let these institutions be. They should run professionally, and of course they in tandem with the government, of course, but at the same time they should do whatever they have to do. We should be helping them bolster their capacity, whatever they need. Do they need other advisors to be with them, other expertise to be available to them? That is what the government should be able to kind of do. But institutions in India must be, their credibility must be restored. Without that, we cannot do anything. Second is that we need to figure out how to boost the economy in the short term. I think that's very important, because rural demand is in bad shape, consumer demand overall is in bad shape. People have to understand that you can't be in an urban area and think that rural economy mein problem hai to unka problem hai. That's not, because these are integrated economies. So because the rural economy is in bad shape, your consumer goods industry is in difficulty, right? So you have to worry about that. Auto sales are down, scooter sales are down. I mean, this is, as in the growth rates are really tanking. So we need to boost that, and in my view, one way to boost that is to immediately look at, in the rural areas, immediately look at Manrega and make sure that Manrega is operating at full capacity. Do as much as you can to kind of say, people, you need work, you need help, we're here, no question, just do it. So we've got to do that. We've also got to look at, we've got to immediately set up, the Congress party's come up with this cash transfer scheme, Nyay, something similar to kind of boost consumption because we still don't have a serious inflation issue right now in the country. So, and crude prices, by the way, compared to Dr. Manmohan Singh's time are still low. So we have some headroom. At the same time, of course, this problem of GST and tax revenue shortfalls, they may constrain the next government. But certainly looking at the rural side. And the other thing we should do immediately is let private enterprise, tell private enterprise, go. You're unleashed, do your work. And the Congress has a good proposal on that for MSMEs, where you don't really have to seek permission for the 3-year holiday of things. I wish it were like a permanent holiday. Don't make people go to anybody for permission. If we can get those things started, we need a short-term, we need a bridge to the future. And that bridge must come now in the first phase. And by the way, we have to look at the banking sector. We must not forget that the banking sector deserves, because now the NPA problem is huge. And we also have the non-bank financial companies. They are also in trouble. Mudra loans, their NPs are spiking. So we must really focus on that. Get experts, get them to kind of say, tell us what we can do here. Let us look at the lessons of experience from other countries and from India itself, and let's try and move on to these. These 3-4 things are extremely important and urgent. If we start with those, I think that would be very beneficial.
Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.